Hey, everybody, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Sam Joseph, and today we're very lucky to have technologist Ian Ozsvald on the podcast. He is the founder of Rebel AI. This is the first pilot episode of Rebel AI, the podcast. Ian, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Woohoo! Yeah, sure. Very happy to be here for this pilot episode, and we'll see where we get to.
Absolutely fantastic. And so, Ian, you are the founder of the Rebel AI community. Do you want to
hmm
start off by telling us a little bit about the Rebel AI community and what caused you to found it?
Yeah, sure. Well, I can give you the background story is easy. Having spent the last 7 or so years working in an increasingly strategic capacity with data science teams, so rather than writing my own intellectual property under contract for a client, instead I go and work with a team, often rebuilding teams, and I build up a really good team. And then once I built up a really good team, I'd help them hire in a senior to replace me, and I'd move on, and I'd get sad after that because I'd lose contact with my excellent leaders. And they carried on doing really good work. And so then I just lose contact. And a couple of years ago, I turned back to a few of my old teams and said, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we had a trusted place where we could all be a little bit ignorant and scared and confused at times and being wondrous in the face of opportunity, but wondering if we were making the right or the best decisions. We could have a trusted, safe place, a private place where we could talk about this. And a bunch of them said, yes, I really want this because I hate having no one to talk to about these difficult decisions. I certainly can't go to my juniors and say, I haven't got a clue what we should do next, nor should I go to my seniors and the founders and say, I haven't got a clue what's happening. And so maybe a trusted, safe place was a good idea. So I put together Rebel AI. And now I get to exist in the company of shortly about 30 excellent leaders, all data scientists, hands-on people who have gone up the leadership journey, just like I have, where we're all figuring out these things together, and everyone's got a wide variety of experience. Some in their first journey into leadership, leading their first small team. Others at director level, with tens or hundreds below them, and everyone collaborating. And it's really nice. I'm really happy with what I've built, and I'm really happy that you're in there, Sam, and you are sufficiently happy with what we've built. And I say we because it is our community. You're sufficiently happy with it that you've decided to interview me about it. So, what's your reflection on it?
Yeah, well, I mean, full disclosure, as you've already pointed out, I am highly biased here. I am a member of the community, and I'm very much enjoying being a member of the community. I'm terribly jealous that I didn't create such community myself. It's a selective community. I've historically been involved in a lot of open communities, which have their own challenges. But yes, I think you very carefully selected who's come in to the community, and you've also very carefully scaffolded the kinds of interactions that people are having, which might sound like micromanagement, but I think you're doing it in a kind of inclusive, benevolent dictator style that is working really, really, really well. I think in some ways, the biggest challenge almost seems to be that not that the community isn't incredibly valuable, which I think it is often the people in these leadership positions are terribly busy, and so just even
Exactly.
finding
Yeah.
the space to kind of engage and so on is challenging. But I think, yeah, we are continuing to evolve the community and try to make it best serve everybody who's a part of it.
Absolutely. That the fact that everyone's busy, that is the biggest constraint. So the fact that when I talk to people about joining the group, the consistent pushback that I get is it's not the right time for me right now
Yeah,
because I'm
yeah.
so busy. But in a few months' time, when I've hired a few more people and the pressure is off, I would love to be in the group. And I have to
Mm.
point out, if you're stuck in that, if you've been doing that for a year, it's probably going to go on. And finding a different strategy there is important. Of course, people in the group who are in, they're all excellent leaders, so they're all busy. So that's why, yeah, that scaffold you mentioned, the design of the group, the 1.5 hour meeting we have once a month together, and then the asynchronous Slack communication, and then the in real life events in the pub. They're there to fit around the fact that we're all really, really busy. I've got a 4-year-old. I've got a client. I've just published, I'm in the process of publishing the third edition of my high performance Python book. There's just lots going on with all of our lives, and carving out time for a fun community is it's not going to happen during the workday. But something that helps us focus, make better decisions, have an impact upon our colleagues, and then say with a straight face to everyone around, "Hey, this is good for me." That's something that's valuable, but it has to be then curated carefully.
It,
So I put a
it,
lot of
it, it
time
it
into that.
does, and there's we're still exploring all the different ways to do that. I mean, I think the thing apart from the selectivity, is the structure of the crit thing, which is the sort of in some ways
Hmm.
still the main event.
Hmm.
And I think that the particular aspect of it is that um, I know, and I imagine maybe putting words into your mouth, but I imagine that you're thinking about so many of the different conversations that happen in all parts of work, where excitable, confident people do all the talking,
Hmm.
and maybe dominate a group, and that's a real challenge. And so what you've done with the crit is you've structured it so that everybody gets a little bit of chance to comment on
Hmm.
the topic that one person has brought. They've got a and rather than it being like, okay, here's a 45-minute presentation and there's a chance
Hmm.
for one or two questions, here's a really concise summary
Hmm.
of the thing. And and I've seen, having delivered a crit myself, how carefully you work with the people who are
Hmm.
presenting the crits to make sure that that 5 minutes is used as effectively as
Hmm.
possible. And then
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
structured hand raising, everybody question response, with some variation, is, I think, and I remember you saying, you said it more in the earlier ones, is like, I will be taking notes on who is participating, as I think you were keen to point out,
Hmm.
like this is, we want to get the value here from, so all
Yeah.
of those little things. I mean, what I'm fascinated is how you put all of that together. I mean, it just, now we're doing it, it's like, oh yes, that's obviously, but I imagine that was a process of many years of you seeing lots and lots of different kinds of interactions to have the idea to structure the crits in that way.
Yeah, the design of this I can happily attribute to somebody else, a colleague of mine, a chap
Ah,
called Matt Weston, who I've been turning to for a lot of years, who's not a technologist,
interesting.
who's actually in the kind of architect around public spaces space. So he works
Mhm.
with councils, say, on regeneration, and he's come up through a background in architecture and design.
Right,
So
right.
he's worked with lots of groups around design. And in fact, the name Crit comes from an event he used to participate in, Crits,
Ah.
in a university setting, where the students were asked to, well, they were required to stand on stage. And unlike our Crit, which is inclusive and supportive, they were put on stage to be ridiculed. They would, as I understand it, they would get up, they would give their presentation. Here's this thing that I've designed. I poured my heart and soul into it. And then
Yes.
the room, professors through students, were there to poke holes in it.
Right.
And sometimes, sometimes, yeah, I believe a little bit more aggressively, perhaps, than might have been just supportive. So a different setting, but we
Mm.
took this idea of this critique,
Mm.
and so in Rebel we say, right, you've got a 45-minute session. We want the majority of this should be the critter, the person running the crit, shuts up, doesn't say anything. They're there to listen and get advice. So they
Mm.
get 5 minutes, and as you say, I curate that with them. They get 3 slides to set the scene, say what they're trying to achieve, and then how it's worked and how it hasn't worked. And then ultimately, there's like a statement at the end. This is what I want to get out of this crypt.
Yes.
And then there's 40 odd minutes for the assembled critiquers, sort of 12 to 15 people from the group on that call synchronously,
Mm.
taking turns to give feedback, ask questions, dig into the problem a bit more, help define it,
Mm-hmm.
every now and again say, hang on a minute, you've said this is the problem, but actually, I think this is the problem. Do you really want to
Mm.
be solving this? Is a thankless task. Do you really want to be doing that? Sometimes there are some really difficult questions that get asked, so you feel a bit uncomfortable. But then
Mm-hmm.
the critter sat there saying, that's the question I was trying to avoid, but it is the important one, isn't it? I
Right.
said, great, okay, so we'll change direction slightly and dig deeper into that one, and then see if we can rebuild hypotheses, a strategy, a direction of travel,
Mm.
so that person can walk away and then dig further into it. At the end of the session, the critter then replays their main takeaways, so we get a bit of immediate feedback about what's stuck.
Mm.
That gets written up into the Slack so that it can be read up afterwards and referred back to by anyone who's in the community. It's never public; it's kept in the group. And then after that, we go on to what used to be a second crit, but now we've evolved that, and this is part of
Yes.
this community discussion. We've been evolving the design of the community.
Yeah.
And I keep reminding everyone that, yeah, I am the benevolent dictator, but I don't want to be just the one in charge. I want all of
Right.
us to take ownership here. And then the conversation now moves on to 2 breakout rooms where we've voted on topics before, and then people get to select one of 2 rooms. So there are kind of 3 things that you can get value from in that
Yeah.
hour and a half
Yeah.
total session. And then those breakout sessions are also really interesting and really valuable and far more freeform. There, it's a smaller group, maybe 6 or 7 people, because it's kind of half in each room. And
Yeah.
then it's a little bit more like sitting around a table in a coffee shop or a pub and just having a more free-form conversation. And I figure that's certainly it's useful for new members there because that's a
Yes.
smaller group and easier social interaction rather than taking turns and making a point in front of other leaders. And this helps bind the online community. That doesn't help with the in real life community, of course, and I'm a huge fan. Post lockdown, getting out the
Mm.
house, meeting
Yes,
people again,
absolutely.
incredibly important.
Yeah.
There was a lot of isolation, and there still is. I mean, we
Yeah.
don't return to the office as much as we used
No.
to, so it is easier. It's great that we can stay at home and look after kids. I've got a 4-year-old,
Yeah.
but also that is isolating. So then we have
Definitely.
things like the pub meets that we ran one just last week, where we get to talk about other topics, but you look someone in the whites of their eyes sat around that table and you could just have a real human conversation there, and that's all off the record. We write up a couple of high level notes
Yeah.
about the topics that were covered, but that chat just stays in that setting.
Yeah, no, it's all of these different components I think come together really nicely. I mean, I'm also loving the, as you were mentioning, the sort of the breakout rooms subsequently, and I think that's, I mean, there's this always this tension in human dynamics between, yeah, you want to get information to the widest number of people, but as the number of people involved in any interaction goes up, the chances of everybody being fully
Mm.
engaged in that or
Yeah,
being able to fully express some of the,
yeah, yeah,
more
yeah,
difficult
yeah.
things goes down. And so I think that's a real, I mean, when we were doing, a pair of crits back to back, that was, there was, a lot, but it was almost like you're drinking two strong, very shots.
Yeah,
It's like two,
yeah,
like
yeah,
two
yeah.
shots of vodka or two espressos. Whereas I
It
think
was
the
brain
change,
training, right? You
yeah,
had to
yeah,
focus for an hour and a half, and
yeah,
then cue with your questions
right,
or observations, and then make your points succinctly, because it's
yeah,
all about the number of points across different axes that can be raised quickly to give the widest variety of feedback. And yeah, it was tiring. I think this new format is a bit more relaxed in the second half, and I'm thinking about swapping the sequence over. So we start with the breakout
mm,
rooms, which will be
interesting,
friendlier for the new joiners, and
mm,
then we lead into a crit where everyone comes back together. There's a summary, and then we kick
interesting,
off with the main event afterwards. And I think this
interesting.
is, but these are the experiments that we run, right?
Experiments, yeah,
It's all about, I like calling them experiments. We try a thing. If it
yep,
sticks, we keep
yep,
it. If it doesn't, we iterate.
yeah,
And we're evolving. And as the group grows, well, we started with 10, we're coming up to 30, increasing geographic distribution. So
mm,
we should have. What have we got? Switzerland, Germany, Spain, the Netherlands, I think are my further countries. We used to have someone from East Coast US. And then we've got people spread all over the UK. So about a third of the
yeah,
membership is in London, a third in the UK, and nearly a third spread through Europe at the moment. And figuring out ways to address the needs of the membership.
yeah.
That's the whole point of it, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't turn up, and that would be no good.
Indeed so. And yeah, I mean, sort of my knee-jerk reaction to the, I quite like the more fluid chat to become second, but as you say, I mean, it's all about experimenting and evolving and seeing what works for different people. I
Mm,
mean, I think that makes me think of a broader point about there are all sorts of meetups, and particularly if you're lucky enough to be in London, you can go to a different, many multiple meetups, for different groups. And I think what's, often the value that you're getting from that is kind of you're a bit unsure in the sort of
mm,
networking, and by, as you say, you've sort of like pinpointed data science leadership and said, right, if we can bring these people together, then you can get really really high value out of it,
mm,
which is fantastic. Couple of other points I'm just thinking about. Well, you mentioned also about the original crit from this, Matt Weston, and coming from the academic background. And one of the challenges that I found transitioning from academia to industry is that there is a very much more like, right, we will see if we can take your ideas apart mentality in academia, which can be counterproductive in
mm,
industry. Which, although industry often the pressure is, I think I would almost characterize it as in industry the pressure is higher. You have fewer holidays. You're working in some way. I mean, some academics might disagree, but I think there's a lot more flexibility in academia
mhm,
about when you choose to work. The I think in the industry the pay is higher. There's an expectation of working longer and with less flexibility. But so I think, yeah, and a lot of people in this industry feel extraordinarily under pressure, and so and there are some people coming in as critically as they would in an academic context that can lead to fireworks. I think in
mhm.
if you try and translate that directly. But I'm interested in your background. I'd sort of the question is almost your technology origin story. I mean, how did you come flaming out of academia? You were born with a
Mm.
computer in your hands. How did you become the technologist? I don't even know what the
Yeah,
word you
okay,
would
all
use to
right.
describe yourself is.
Well, so yeah, so I described that trajectory, and then that'll lead to the other groups I founded before Rebel
Right.
AI, I think, and then the thoughts on the design of this one.
Mm,
I was born with a computer in my hands.
right.
My late father used to work for the Ministry of Defence, so
Right.
he designed computer and electronic control systems. So I grew up thinking that drawing a circuit diagram as a child or soldering was a normal activity, and learning to
Mm,
program was a normal activity. And it turns out it wasn't. Not everyone in my high school in London had a clue about any of these things,
mm,
or my junior school. But this is what I did. I remember soldering light sensors to the 9-pin joystick port on my Commodore 64 so that it could
mm,
detect someone walking
mm,
past and then use a speech cartridge to talk to me, and then I could interact back with it. And then building robots as a kid, and this was just normal for
mm,
me.
mm,
So the idea of living in some kind of automated reality, and where I control that automation, I'm involved in that.
mhm, mhm.
That was just part of how I thought as a kid, and I couldn't understand why it was all so complicated.
Mm.
Because why was computer vision not solved yet? It didn't seem to be
Right.
that
Right.
difficult. And then, of course, it's really hard. So I went down the theoretical computer science route. Really enjoyed that. Part of the coursework there, designing a compiler, then designing
Mm,
the virtual machine, then implementing the virtual machine to run the compiled output in an
mhm,
interpreted
mm,
fashion.
mm, mm, mm.
Super interesting, really understanding, and I knew the transistor level, so I kind of knew that stack of computers at the time.
Yes. Yes.
That led me down the high performance Python route ultimately. So high performance computing, a lot of C based work, building parallel computers in my first proper role in an AI lab out of my master's degree with
Mhm.
where we had lots of 486s and Pentiums, and we were doing evolutionary computing. That came out of my master's degree,
Mm.
and then we could make these things go faster because they're massively parallel. We can go faster with a Beowulf cluster, so clustering together all of the PCs in the
Right.
office. So I led the charge on designing and implementing that, and then we had all the machines with all their fans whirring, all on the CPU, of course, and all with many megabytes of RAM because gigabytes of
Yeah.
RAM was barely a thing at that time.
Mm.
And then solving transport logistics optimization problems with evolutionary computing, all
Right.
written in C still, at a very high speed rate, and beating traditional optimization methods at the time with
Right.
the approaches we were taking there. And so up to that point, I was always very, very self-driven, very motivated, deeply into C because that was the proper language. Everyone
Mm.
said it was the proper language. None of this
Mm.
interpreted rubbish. Proper language, proper typing. And I kept seeing edges and sort of weird bits around all of this. Strong typing is the way forwards argument,
Mm.
which didn't really match the world that I was operating in. Just because you've got an int or a float, it doesn't define the characteristics of the thing you're measuring or
Mm.
constraining. And that was kind of weird, but it's the way the world worked. And it was the Microsoft language of choice. And then somewhere in there, I was given a project with Python in the AI research company.
Right.
I was told, the PhDs over in the French office, they've written this scraping tool, scrapes in some web text. We need it processed. They're using Python. They're doing natural language processing on it.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, crikey, this language is rubbish. It's verbose. You can't even get manuals for it down at the local Waterstones. It's interpreted, it's slow, it's clunky, this is horrible. And so I spent a couple of days learning the language and solving this SAX parser
Okay.
issue to ingest this data. And then I suddenly realized that, oh, crikey, I'm more performant writing a text-based parser in a couple of days of learning this Python language
Right.
than I am with 5 years commercial experience leading a team head of the engineering in this AI startup in
Hmm.
C++. And that was a hell of an eye-opener.
Yeah.
And then that made me step back and think about what it means to be productive and effective in general. So it's not just
Yes.
about the best language or the fastest language, but
Indeed.
actually having an impact around one's work. Then I switched into Python full time. So I guess, yeah, just looking back, that was a lot of BASIC, a bit of Pascal, a lot of C, a whole bunch of C++, and then switching into Python. that was kind of 20 years ago, and I've never looked
Mm,
back from that. And so Python coupled with C extensions in the background, so
hmm.
Python, and learning how to make all of these things quick to develop, so quick to iterate on ideas in a
Yeah.
couple of lines. You can test the new idea quickly in Python, but then back it out into Python if you need things to run fast.
Right.
And then even that was 15 years ago, playing with the early versions of CUDA. I had one of the first GTX 480s from NVIDIA in the country. We
Mm,
had to build a custom PC, blew a motherboard, blew a power supply until we got the thing working. That was in a physics company that I was later in,
mm,
using Python backed by CUDA to do high-speed physics simulations.
mm.
And then the company asked for a recommendation. What do we do with this CUDA stuff? And I said, oh, well, my recommendation is we do not pursue it, because I'm one of few people in the country, certainly one of the few people in
Mm,
this geographic area, probably the only one, who understands how to write code for it. So
mm,
the
mm.
risk here is crazy high, and we can go not as fast on CPUs, but we can build a
Right.
network of PCs and parallelize
Yeah.
there. And so even back there, when I was playing with the earliest bits of CUDA, I was still kind of against this GPUification
Right.
process. I was fascinated by
Yeah.
hard to
Sure.
see why it was effective. Somewhere in there, I gave a tutorial at EuroPython.
Hmm.
This is, I think, 2012, so was that 13 years ago? That was my first ever contribution to a Python conference, and I gave an 2-hour tutorial. Because I'd learned so much about high performance and I wanted to share it, I
Mm.
forgot to give my students a break. So they kind of walked out sideways with their brains leaking out their ears because I pushed so much down them. And I wrote a mini book, a 50-page book, which I gave away to everyone who came to my tutorial because I was so enthused about this. I wanted to share
Right.
everything I'd learned.
Right.
That turned into a book with O'Reilly, High Performance Python, and the
Yeah.
third edition for that we've just finished over Christmas. Misha Gorolik and I. She'll be at the PyData London conference this June, and then we'll run some kind of session around high performance there. And high performance is interesting. We've spent more time in the book talking about, again, that impact being effective. So
Right.
the book's all about, how do I profile to find where my bottlenecks are so I solve the right problem, and then techniques
Mm,
for
mm.
solving that problem. But there are bits of the book that dig into that philosophical question: what does it mean to be performant? You don't want the fastest code that can't be supported. You want
Right.
the most flexible code that's fast enough so that your team can go fast. And again, back to that point of being effective.
Yes.
Um, and I guess that's it's worth mentioning that I co-founded PyData London as a community over like 11 years ago now,
Right.
and that's grown over a decade to 14,000 members and sort of 200
Mm.
people meeting every month in London. And you come along to that, Sam.
Yes.
And we have lots of technical talks there, which is great. And so I knew there I could build a big meetup. It
Uh-huh.
turns out monthly volunteering, lots of outreach,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
lots of rah-rahing on stage gets you a consistent and growing high-quality crowd.
Mm.
But that fed back, of course, into the design of Rebel. I didn't want a
Right.
big meetup here. I wanted, as you were saying earlier, that selective component. I wanted just the right people, just a small
Absolutely.
group of people who collaborate and work together and support each other. And what's lovely is I still get to talk about tech stuff. I played with that Arc
Right.
AGI LLM challenge. I'm going to
Yes.
go back onto that shortly now that the book is published. So I'm still very much writing code on the newsletter I put out this morning. I've just talked about some of the innovations that I played with late last year, which I think are still very relevant in this strange and rapidly moving LLM space. But always with an eye to, what's the point? Why does this make
Right.
us effective? Why do we have a good life out of this? Why is our team happy? Why is our management happy? How do I have some impact that makes all of this worthwhile? So that was a long ramble, Sam.
Yeah, yeah.
Went all over the place.
You're a great talk. Well, you're a great talker, and I was, it makes my job as a podcast host very easy. You're just basically, knocking it up, smashing it out, and I think people are going to find it absolutely fascinating. I mean, little points there. I'm so glad that I brought up the ARC AGI challenge to you last summer and said, "Oh, we should look at
Mm.
this," and then I was
Of
slightly
course,
jealous.
yes. I think, yeah. And that was it. It was popping up in various places, but you brought it up a couple of times. And then I had a look at it and I thought, good grief, this is hard.
Mhm.
And I thought, great. It turns out I've got a 3.5-year-old at the time, and I'm sleeping consistently again, so I have some spare brain power. So much to my wife's annoyance, I decided to camp out in my office late at night, buy myself a GPU, and then sit there hacking away with ideas, running a local model, and just throwing myself into it. It was the first time in probably 4 or 5 years that I got to dive into something technologically new and then
Mm.
properly immerse myself outside of client work, outside of working on the book, outside of being a sourdough baker, which is another little love of mine. Turns out
Yes.
sourdough is as complicated as programming, getting it right, so many variables. Um,
Yeah, yeah, no, it's great stuff. I mean, well, it's interesting to connect it back to the hardware thing. I was also building robots in school, but I remember I sanded off my finger trying to get the acrylic thing, which put me off hardware. I could really do with
Hardware's hard.
yeah,
Hardware's really hard.
GPU
And
on
actually, I
my
mean, you're
desk.
right. The RKGI thing, that was the thing that where I got myself a GPU, having done GPUs 15 years ago, and then blown a
Yes.
PC, blown a power supply. Had the GPU melt because it was a poorly constructed PCB, and then have to get another one.
Mm,
I thought, great, 15 years later, it must be so much easier now. And then I spent 6 weeks recompiling kernels and trying different
mm,
configurations to get my GPU to talk to my machine, even though allegedly all the hardware was fully supported. And then I got there in
yeah,
the end, and then of course NVIDIA upgrade the drivers and everything breaks a bit, and then you have to do it again. It's, oh
yeah,
crikey, it's still the same old mess 15 years later.
yeah.
But the fan goes brrr, and then you get your tokens spitting out, and it's kind of magical and it's bizarre
Yes,
and bonkers. This very clever next best word or next best token
yes, yes.
completion machine, and navigating token vector space, and trying to diagnose what the heck is going on when you're trying to make it do something really difficult. These logical puzzles that it's never seen on the internet before, so it was never trained to solve. But fascinating, just
Yeah,
so
no, well,
fascinating.
and you've got some fascinating insights from like about the way in which the formatting of what you're sending in affects things, and people should sign up for your newsletter to read more about that, or come to the talks that you're giving at PyData. We're also finding, there's an example just this week of something exactly along those lines,
Mhm.
like a changing of formatting, producing different performance.
Mm,
It's an extraordinary time, and it makes me, you very much say, you come from this background in high performance Python. Um, there's this switch where, I mean, data science as a term, was not so big 10, 15, 20 years
mm,
ago, but and it was PyData, I guess was the community. And of course, talking about the monthly volunteering and so on. I mean, I think I'm sure you would agree that part of what's made PyData so popular, not just your own contribution, the contribution of the volunteers, is also there's a kind of, is it a zeitgeist whereby Python has become hugely
mm,
popular. Data science has become hugely popular. I mean,
mm,
in
mm,
London, we've got all the big Google, Microsoft, everybody,
mm,
around the world, the PyDatas are, this is, what everybody's excited about. But the community is called Rebel AI, and of course we're undergoing
mm,
an
mm,
AI revolution. But the target is data science team leadership, not, for example, we're not saying, oh, this is for AI teams and so
mm.
on. So I wonder if you just talk a little bit about labeling it as Rebel AI. It could be called Rebel
Yeah,
DS, couldn't
okay.
it? Yeah, what's going on there?
Yeah, sure, sure. So to give it a little bit of context, building PyData London. So PyData London is one of 240 PyData open meetups around the world, and kind of the 10 or so conferences that occur around the world.
Mm, mm.
And our PyData London, I'm just super proud, with 14,000 members, is the
That's great.
largest. So that's amazing. And it's a generalist AI crowd. So a lot of people
Mm,
are in data science, but we have BI, stats people. We're very friendly to other languages. There are people there. We have people cross training coming in either out of academia.
mm.
They come out, say, with a PhD in the domain, or they're coming out of academia with a different domain, or they've come through an entirely different domain. I met a lot of nurses
Hmm.
and healthcare professionals transitioning, at
Right.
least sort of pre-COVID, so in
Sure.
the proper dot-com boom time, when everything was racing up. And as you said, there was this boom period. There's been this
Mm.
great wave, and then we have ridden the success of that. I didn't see that coming. I just wanted a community. People used to ask me, "Why do you volunteer every month to build this data
Yeah.
science community?" And I used to joke, people like me come to the pub and talk to me about the stuff that I care about." And then after I
Yeah.
said that for a couple of years, I realized that was exactly the truth. I just wanted people to come to the pub with me and talk about this stuff,
There you go.
which great. That makes me happy.
Yeah.
So that was designed for like a general data science group, very inclusive, very open. It's got a very strong code of conduct. Everyone is welcome. Everyone
Yep.
has to be nice to each other, and that works very well. And then with Rebel AI, talking with my colleague Matt about the name of this thing. Partly AI has been the long run term, right? So AI
Mm,
was a thing in the 60s.
of course.
AI is still a thing. Right now, data science, the name is less frequently used than AI. Everything's AI. Nobody knows what
Mm.
AI means, but it's the term. If it's been around for the better part of 60 years, I figure that term's going to persist into the future.
Yeah.
And Rebel, too many times in my career, I've been working with non-technical or technical managers or non-technical, but outside of the data science context.
Sure.
And they can't see why it's difficult. They can't
Mm.
understand why you've got the data, you've had months with the data.
Right,
Why
right.
haven't you produced the really good predictor that makes us loads of money? And then no matter how much you try and explain it, it's really difficult. And you just must fit into our Scrum process. You must estimate how long it will take you to go
Yeah.
through
Right.
the de-risking phase and get the answers to the questions where we don't know what the questions are, let alone what
Yeah.
the answers might look like on this
Mm.
data that no one has ever consumed. And we're sure is great, and we're sure there's lots of it, and it must be consistent, even though we've never had to get any actionable insight from it. And I just
Mm.
know that that's just a mess. That's all going to be a mess at that point. So a part of the reason for talking about being rebels is we need to do things differently. We can't
Right.
just fit into the corporate process for
Right.
doing data science as an adjunct to engineering or
Yes.
technology or any other regular business process. We need to develop our own processes.
Right.
And 10 years ago, when I was sort of started to look back on my career and wonder why I had so many failures behind me. And it took me a while to realize actually it's not me. It can be me, I'm sure, but it's not me. It's I've got bad data. I've got people
Right.
expecting magic in no time at all. I've got people saying in 3 months' time they want me to generate a patent that would be defensible against something that Google hasn't solved yet. And so well, these are crazy questions.
Sure.
Why
Sure.
do you think this is a reasonable question? And that led me through lots of corporate engagements, building up teams, working alongside perfectly sensible, nice, good people who just asked the wrong questions and tried to
Right.
organize the group the wrong way and had the wrong expectation.
Mm.
And so here with Rebel AI, I want my leaders to have a bit of have a chance to breathe a sigh of relief and recognize
Mm.
that it's okay to do things differently. It's okay to say, we think we might be doing it wrong right now. We need to change our plan, but I don't know what the change is. And then we can
Mm.
talk about it. So a little bit of rebelliousness, a little
Yeah.
bit of
Oh,
free thinking, I think is totally the right way to go.
absolutely. Yeah, no, I love the Rebel, and of course, I mean, I love the AI, and my own team, is an AI team,
Hmm.
which is a name that I pushed for, and we have data scientists and software engineers.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the interesting thing to me is I mean, I guess I'm hearing from your background, there was with the masters there's a research component to it, but I imagine for many years it was you would have called yourself a software engineer rather than a data scientist, whereas probably now you might more frequently refer to yourself as a data scientist. I mean, I think the thing partly I so love the Rebel AI community. What the only thing that I kind of miss is the kind of like having a Python community of that kind.
Hmm.
So although I come from like
Yeah,
a
you brought this up in the Slack before, haven't you? And
right.
you've shared a couple of things that you found, but yeah, there doesn't seem to be that equivalent for people on the engineering track, which is certainly interesting.
Indeed, but so yeah, which I'm starting to explore and make connections with people that maybe one day there will be
Mm-hmm.
a Rebel
Hmm.
Python community or something. There are other sorts of communities that exist. Anyway, we don't have to list them now, but yeah, I guess I mean, do you see like because you one could there's different levels as we talk about also within Rebel. You're considering right how Rebel AI it's been focused on data science leadership, but then okay, are we going to include individual contributors and there's all sorts of options
Mm.
there. I mean, and similarly, you could be focusing on a hypothetical Rebel Python community could be looking at these things. Like there are people who are leading engineering teams who
Mm-hmm.
presumably have very very similar in some ways
Mm.
problems,
Mm.
but
Mm. Mm.
where the
Mm.
data thing is
Yeah.
these things are side by side. So I think well, I mean, I think
So
it's a
it's
fantastic
it's
model. Should
totally
be
valid to
replicated. Go on.
talk about that kind of challenge and finding the right kind of group. And people have asked me, how broad am I going to make Rebel
Yes,
AI?
sure.
Is it going to be just AI, or could it be so much more?
Yeah.
And frankly, I wouldn't want to be a part of a community that's grown so
No,
broad,
no,
because
no.
I only care about the bit that gets people to come to the pub with me and talk about AI. It turns out that's my passion. That's been my passion since I was about that big. It just is. It's going to be
Oh,
for the next decade or two. It just is. So that's the community that I want. I've talked about expanding the definition to include data engineer leaders, because they're the obvious adjunct to data
yes.
science. Very similar leadership challenges
Yeah.
and the same moving morass of weird data and consumption problems and deployment problems and the rest. I think there's a lot that we could learn from those two communities. In the next cohort that joins in a couple of weeks, we've got our first data engineer leader joining there. We talked about the academic component. We had an academic professor join late last year from one of the cohorts, where he was ex-industry,
Right.
came into academia, eyes open, fully understanding that there'll be different pressures there, running a team of, I think, 7
Yeah.
PhDs who are all on industrial placements
Right.
around green energy. And he wanted to make sure he was doing the best he could for with his team by looking at that AI statistical leadership component, particularly with collaboration to many external organizations. And I'm now wondering about getting some independent contributors involved in the community, where they've probably it'll be interesting to them if they've had experience in a leadership role,
Yeah.
or will go into a leadership role.
Yeah.
But we've got so much conversation going on in the community around LLMs, Gen AI, mainly LLMs. We've got a bunch of us who have got good opinionated positions based on evidence, and a bunch more who
Yeah.
are wandering into the domain and saying, crikey, it's moving quickly. What the heck should I be doing? And I can't help but think that maybe a couple of motivated ICs who would get value out of the leadership conversation and who would
Yes.
contribute their own hands-on experience could be an interesting direction of travel. As I see it, kind of, we've started with this tight-knit group of leaders in
Yeah.
data science, in permanent organizations, and now I'm trying some experiments, speckling people around the edges and
Yeah.
kind of drawing kind of the boundary out a little way, not too far, but a little
Yeah.
way. We've got a couple of people running consultancy groups. They're excellent data scientists leading consultancy teams, which is another experiment. I don't know how well that will
Yeah.
stick. I think it will work. So we're trying that in the next cohort. And then as a group, as a community, we'll talk about, is this the right direction of travel? Should we change direction? So yeah, I like these experiments. The one thing that
No.
I'm finding really tricky but constantly on my mind, is the diversity of angle. I don't want cookie cutter versions of me in this group, because I just
No.
get the same singular position, and that's pretty rubbish. When we started the group, I had 35% female leadership in the group. We're kind of 25% at the moment. It's dropping a little bit.
Yeah.
Pi Data London, we get 15% female attendance, not leadership attendance, but just
Yeah.
attendance.
Yeah.
So we're well above the average that I would
Correct.
expect in the community. That's not good enough, but I'm
Yeah.
maintaining that. And we've certainly got a diversity of background, religion,
Yeah.
country of origin, and the rest. So we've got a nice diversity of experience. Because I think one of the challenges in leadership is, if whatever journey you've been on, you see the world through that lens, and it's only
Sure.
by hearing the journey of other people,
Yeah. Yeah.
particularly biases and how they have played out in organizations and countries, geographies, political systems, whatever, that we realize, oh, actually, yeah, this is a path, and there are all these other paths, and there are things to learn from all of them. So that diversity angle, diversity of thought, is incredibly important to me in Rebel AI, and I'm happy with where we are.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got to keep teasing at the edges and pulling out and seeing where we can shape it to.
Absolutely. Well, we can connect that back to your early work in, evolutionary programming. Is the genetic diversity.
Yeah, absolutely.
The diversity of it. No, absolutely. And I mean, I think I love the small experiments. And yeah, and I would be. I think you're absolutely right. We one of the core values, or the core value that one derives, shall we say, comes from, I think, your focus on keeping it tight. And I think if we were to massively expand the community in too many directions at the same time, we would lose a lot of the value. I think what I'm seeing for myself is, like, I would like to see more similar communities that were like to, like, a Rebel Python that was like separated and could be that the focused thing. But that yeah, I mean, as you're referring to, that there is all this AI, all these LLMs going on. I mean, that's leads me on to sort of broader questions that I think we're very focused on the immediate pragmatic side. This field is moving fast. What should I be doing? How can I use it?
Mhm.
But I'm really interested to hear your take on the kind of the future of the AI and what's happening
Mhm.
with the LLMs. I mean, the it is a very, very exciting time for AI, and I think I've been pretty gobsmacked in the last few years about things that I was always hoping we might see. I've been looking at AI for 40 odd years or so. It really is a remarkable time, and yeah, I don't know. Like, I've tried to raise the question of like, where is this all going? And I think our busy data science leaders they're busy leading data science. They don't
Yeah,
necessarily have
sure.
the so much space to get involved in protracted discussions about the future of AI, and humanity. But I wonder, yeah, what's your stance on
Well,
on where we're
it's
going?
only on my mind because I've got with my client at the moment. I've got a Blue Sky AI session for the founders of the company next week, and one of my observations. Well, there's a couple of observations, I guess.
Mm,
One is having had some periods of acceleration in industry. So when I started my career, it was all about genetic algorithms, evolution,
yeah.
so robust strategies that could be parallelized across multiple CPUs to get past the constraints of good old-fashioned AI planning systems and
Mm,
rule-based
mm,
systems of the time. So that was amazing, and that definitely made progress. And then some years later, we see the rise of these artificial neural networks, which are really, really slow. They've always been there, but they were
mm.
really, really slow. But suddenly, there were these GPUs that could sometimes run these things a bit faster. You sort of push it onto the gaming hardware the right
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
And at the same time, I was playing with fluid dynamic simulations and physics simulations on GPUs. Then I see sort of the very early the precursors to PyTorch, say,
yeah.
and then we had our deep learning revolution, and then the growth of GPUs as AI accelerators. There was a huge push there. That was the next big thing, and that coincided with data science being the sexiest job of the 21st century. And
Mm,
that was great until everyone realized, oh yeah, my data's busted. And
mm,
also, if my data's not busted, my ability to affect positive change in an organization is really difficult because humans
mm.
change slowly.
Right,
Humans don't want to be optimized out of a job or be given a new business process where their bonus might be at stake because there's this new
right.
risky thing going on around them.
Mm,
So I find it just from an effectiveness point of view, thinking about, all right, I can make the numbers crunch faster, but if I can't get the data in, or the data's crap, because often
right,
it's crap, and I can't affect change on the other side, I can't get a positive story out of that piece.
of course.
And so you have to do a lot of data cleaning, data prep. And then we get to LLMs now, where a year and a half ago on my newsletter, I said, look, I asked it to write a bio of Ian Ozsvald, and Ian Ozsvald is an excellent data scientist who has a PhD. I don't have a PhD, and is the author of these 5 books, including Pandas. And I said, no, Wes McKinney will be a bit annoyed at me if I claimed authorship of his book and all of these others. Like it's regurgitating rubbish off of the web.
Yeah, yeah.
It's generalizing a data scientist has to have a PhD. So these are a bit crap. I
Yes.
asked it to write a bio for my wife. Emily Oswald is an excellent data scientist who runs a meetup in London. And she is the author of several books. It's like, no, you've just hung off the name Oswald now and
Yes,
connected
yes,
the
yes.
dots really badly. But these things are crap. But then they've rapidly become not crap. And then that's
Indeed.
kind of amazing. Um, and the world of speech recognition, I talk to my Alexa, my Fire Stick in the front
Yeah,
room. I've held off talking to devices for about a decade because I remember what speech recognition used to
yeah,
be like. Turns out it's not bad now,
yeah.
even with a child screaming in the background. So that's kind of transformative. And then I have leadership teams looking at the rise of LLMs, just saying, but they solve everything. And if they don't now, they will soon. And I've been saying,
Mm,
oh, put the brakes on there because that's kind of crazy. But 6 months ago, I was talking about a context window of 100 pages if we were lucky. And now we
yes.
can talk about a context window of 10,000 pages.
Mm,
And doesn't mean that he gets the answer right, but the pace of change is bonkers. I've
yes.
started playing with a tool called Ada, AIDER,
Mm,
which represents a new paradigm in development. So rather than typing and having an autocomplete occur next to you, and maybe you ask the odd question,
yeah.
instead you go back to text mode and you say, go into architect mode. I would like to think about building an
Yeah.
AI system that ingests this kind of document. It will need this kind of processing.
Right.
Could you propose a framework? And it'll explain a framework. And then go into coding mode. Now write me the code and build the unit tests. And then you look at it, you look at the tests. If the tests look good, and you say, all right, do the tests run? You run the tests. Oh, the tests run. I haven't even got to. I mean, I would, but you haven't even got to look at the code because the tests looked good and the tests pass. So now it's almost like just kind of offshoring that work to a remote team that you never
Right.
actually meet and you only type with. But
Yes.
that's happening via your LLM. And that looks
Mm.
amazing and magic. And of course, it opens up all sorts of interesting avenues for exploits, security vulnerabilities,
Yes.
data leakages, poor code, unmaintainable morasses of duplicated mess.
You mean
And
just like
stuff
what we have to deal with already?
well, but that's it. Is that a
Cool.
million miles away from what we had if we just threw a bunch of juniors at a challenge and had someone who didn't know leadership running that junior team?
Indeed.
And then that kind of gets you onto that interesting question. Well, if you don't need the juniors anymore because we can outsource that, but we've got the experienced leaders because we've got a decade or 15 years in sort of data
Mm.
science with the right leaders there, the experienced leaders leading these machines with an adjunct of humans, building up these systems, which is kind of the vision. Just fire your workforce, maybe keep one who's in charge of it.
Right.
Who becomes a senior leader in the future? Where do those
Indeed.
senior leaders come from if you've got rid of all your juniors? I know of graphic design departments where they don't have interns anymore because
Right.
they've outsourced all the work to Gen AI.
Mm.
And it's fine today, but what happens tomorrow when we've lost the intake, the reason for getting those junior people in to let them
Yes.
explore the space? So that's kind of on my mind, and just this general belief that you can outsource everything to an LLM now or soon, and increasingly you will be able to for certain domains.
Mm.
Um, but will it ever be really good? I don't know. I don't think so. I suspect we're going to see pushing down that avenue and then a recognition that actually we need teams with diverse thinking. So maybe
Mm.
neurodiversity in a team to help us understand this different brain type that is producing a lot of the code, but
Right.
isn't
Right.
necessarily producing the right code. So I'm kind of hopeful that we're going to see a recognition that rebuilding teams with a healthy respect for neurodiversity would be a good idea,
Yes.
because I see the LLM as being a different kind of brain.
Right.
It does work differently to us. It does have different blind spots. The vision models literally have different blind spots to the
Yes.
human visual processing function. So yeah, that's going to be weird. We're going to have to untangle a lot of that. But where it all goes after that, crikey, I have no idea. It's kind of bonkers. We've always had the next fourth generation language idea where you
Yeah.
didn't have to code, you just expressed,
Yep.
you wrote on the back of a napkin what the idea was, and then something would make it. That's never panned out. It turns
No.
out the only way
Very
to
long.
get a
Yeah.
really accurate specification of a system is to code the damn thing. So
Mm.
you
Mm.
need code in there, and you need someone who understands that code. Testing will become more sophisticated around that. Um, as we've got computer use coming in from Anthropic,
Yep.
now from OpenAI,
AI. Yeah.
with the LLM taking screenshots and then driving the keyboard and mouse. That's going to lead to even richer testing scenarios than Selenium enabled us to have,
Yeah.
and no doubt exploitation or data exfiltration opportunities,
Mm.
and room for mistakes. Oops, my LLM accidentally authorized the transfer of £1 million out of my company bank account,
Mm.
because I was testing some banking system and
Yeah.
it had a bit of a hallucination. There's going to be a couple of those stories floating
I'm
around out
sure.
there, and then there'll be checks and guards that have to come in around it again, and a bunch more
Yep.
process. Uh, I don't know. There's a lot of things on my mind. I don't know where it all goes though.
No, and it's really interesting. I mean, I get the sense that you feel that the LLM, like in terms of its ability levels, might start to plateau, which I think some people are sort of saying that they're seeing. I mean, there's been this big switch from ever increasing, the number of parameters in the models to
Yeah,
now this sort of chain of thoughts, and of course,
yeah.
O1, and
Inference
there's that
time,
being the focus.
computation. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and of course, just recently we've got DeepSeek, which has come out,
yeah.
which has been, sort of rocked the world of AI
Hmm.
in that,
Yeah.
it seems like actually this belief in huge compute and huge more data and
Yeah.
huge everything that is the way to scale and get better performance, which seemed to be plateauing out, and now actually it seems like, a really careful attention to the data and the process and the training and so on, can produce. I mean, isn't it? They're getting like O1 like results from, a much much smaller
DeepSeek
competitor that,
R1, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
yeah, with open
Depending
source
on how
weights.
you slice it and read it, sort of ten
Yeah.
times less training or 10 times less compute cost, or more, depending on what you read. I mean, the mechanism of doing that with having some kind of validator around the output from the chain of thought process.
Yeah.
That's super fascinating. That's easily replicated by everybody else, and it's great that they
Yes.
publish that. So for anything where we've got a verifier like write valid Python, which
Yeah.
solves this well-specified unit test, or
Yeah.
derive this math solution using this line of thinking, and then checking it with
Yeah.
SymPy symbolically, perhaps. That's great when it comes to any kind of human creative piece. You summarize this text, or write me a nice story. You can't validate that. You need a human. I think you need a
Mm.
human in the loop for that. You can give it
Mm.
to a machine, and it will give you its own view, but it won't be the human thought. I can't help but think that people who are good at teaching language or
Yes.
history or philosophy are going to have a part to play here, because that, I call it soft human thought, but a soft human thought as in I can't just write down what the answer is and explain why in
Mm.
clearly reproducible steps that we can in programming and math. Otherwise, you need other lines of thinking, other lines of
Mm.
critique. So I think there's going to be something interesting that falls out of that. And at the same time, the world will increasingly become more complex.
Yeah.
If it's easy to ingest PDFs of, I don't know, financial data that I'm ingesting for my clients in static reports, who's going to stop people making interactive reports with embedded graphs, or more fancy representations of the data, which I'll then have to ingest? It will just enrich the complexity.
Mm.
Or why have static PDFs anyway? Why not just have embedded web pages, which are fully interactive with live data sources? Well, computer use can drive that maybe. So there's going to be some kind of weird loop,
Mm.
adding more complexity there, quite separately from, and I hope you don't mind the profanity, the enshittification of the internet, just where we use spam writers and then automated spam writers from LLMs to just push out more
Right.
crap onto the internet, just increasing the volume of dross that's out there.
Yes. Yes. And it's sort of
All of those
it ends up
auto-generated YouTube
eating its own
videos and the
tail.
rest. Yeah, right. Well, I mean, I let my son watch a bit of YouTube, and then as soon, because I monitor it, as soon as I see that he's on yet another auto-generated Minecrafty like video with
Mm.
a computer, well, with an LLM script, just going, ooh, ah, wow, then
Yeah.
it's like, right, get rid of that because that's crap. I do not want you learning that sequence of what apparently humans do. That's rubbish. Go back to some kind of human curated
Yeah.
content. I got him watching some Brian Cox exploration of the Serengeti this morning. I was like, there we go. This is
Yeah.
reasonable for a 4-year-old. This is good educational material, not that YouTube rubbish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
YouTube could really do with providing some sort of framework to allow parents to program what their children, even my
well, I
16-year-old, I
saw
wish I had more control.
some authors guild, I didn't track the details, but some authors guild coming up with a mark of quality, which is human written text. So books
Right.
published by human, as a
Interesting.
way of differentiating auto generated crap,
Yeah.
because on Amazon you can get your auto generated crap books, and they'll often have the same title or even claim the author's name, in the hope that they can piggyback off somebody
Yeah.
else's
Yeah.
reputation.
Absolutely.
And the idea of a stamp of human quality. This was authored
Yeah.
by a biological construct. Oh, crikey, that's
Yeah.
it's
But
out
it's
of sci-fi, right?
yeah, yeah. No, no, it's strange times. But it's interesting. I get the sense, reading between the lines, that you don't give much credence to the idea that some, in 3, in 10, in 15 years, that some future, multi-agent LLM system, some new thing, is going to be going toe to toe with the best human. That seems that's still like a kind of a science fiction thing from your perspective. You don't think they're going to evolve in that way.
I don't know. Einstein and Feynman didn't become megalomaniacs and take over the world. They were just very smart people working on certain things. There
Sure.
are other megalomaniacs out there, and they're not necessarily the brightest people in the world. They've
Mm,
got very different human drives, mammalian drives, and abilities. And I don't know that we need an AI to compete with that.
mm,
And we could have very, very sophisticated political LLMs that do. I mean, I'm sure we will have political LLMs that sway
mm.
opinion, and may try to take over a political process. When do we have the LLM party up for election,
Right, right, right.
with its high minded thoughts for a utopian future?
Mm.
who knows? It's possible.
Yeah. Oh well,
Um,
you've gone in an interesting direction. When I said toe to toe, I didn't necessarily mean in terms of like taking over and subjugating, enslaving the human race, so much as the things that we can see, even in O1 and the latest LLMs is them getting stuck in cycles, them not being
mhm,
it's clear that they're not as smart as the smartest humans. But when I said toe to toe, more it's this question of like, are they always going to be missing something that humans have, or is there the possibility, independently of what social outcome there is
mhm,
or what have you,
mhm,
that in the future, for example, you might have an LLM professor, and yeah, still the human input, and you've got the human PhD
mhm,
students,
mhm,
but
mhm,
the LLM professor is competing with the best professors, and people start to say, well, I'd much rather work for an LLM professor
mhm,
because he's getting in more grant funding,
mhm,
and
mhm.
is helping me produce better papers. I don't
Yeah.
know. It doesn't seem. I've been so surprised by the recent progress that
Mhm.
that sort of future doesn't seem completely impossible to me. But I'm not sure. Does
No,
that
sure.
make
Well,
any?
I mean, automated drivers on our public roads are difficult, but an automated driver on a fast hill climb event, the computer drivers are really good. They don't necessarily beat the best humans.
Mm,
They'd
mm,
beat the heck out of me. They'd beat most of humanity at that particular sport. Um, Terence Tao, I think Math Olympiad, has been talking about using LLMs in the research context,
right,
and saying how GPT O1 or O3 can't solve all of the Olympiad challenges, but also he can't solve all of the Math Olympiad
right.
challenges. And crikey, I can't solve any of the Math Olympiad challenges.
Mm,
So it's smarter than me there.
mm,
It's smarter than most, and it's so general. It is smarter than most of us in many areas,
mm,
and it has its blind spots. I think, well, partly one thing I don't think we're going to see is one general purpose machine, a HAL
mm,
9000, that does
mm,
everything really well.
right.
I think we have to see specialization.
Hmm.
Having a really smart human typically doesn't lead to a megalomaniac. Just looking at history, right? That's not a philosophical position. It's just we haven't tended to see people who are really,
Mm,
really bright go on to try to enslave humanity.
mm,
We see other types of people who get into politics, not necessarily enslaving humanity, but taking control of a direction for humanity.
mm,
That's a different thing. So different specialization in worldview, experience, motivation. And I think machines, you know, fundamentally, I believe we are machines. We're a
mm,
biological machine, but we're still a machine. I think machines tend to specialize in certain directions, and so we'll see more of that. But yeah, I don't think we're going to see a general. I don't think that the Chat GPT can solve everything model is the right way forwards. And
mm,
I've been surprised, actually. Frankly, this is an interesting point. I've been surprised that we haven't seen more diversity and approach in the models, like the LLM models that are out
mm,
there.
mm.
When I was working on RKGI, that's all around lateral thinking, pattern
Yes.
spotting, describing a solution and then coding it up. Coding up a solution from a described problem that's reasonably solved, which in itself is bonkers. But
Mm,
all the models that I tried kind of described the problem the same way, or they just couldn't figure out what they were looking at. And I was assuming that between the big companies and the big geographies, we would see different models of thought about how to perceive the world. A bit
mm.
like thinking like so mammalian intelligence with our
Right.
brain design and a cephalopod, with a distributed brain design and a very different
Yes.
perceptual understanding of the world,
Like an octopus.
and communication ability with the world. But we don't seem to see that kind of cephalopod versus GPT kind of breakdown in LLMs. They all transform our architecture. They're all kind of the same thing.
Mm,
Trained in slightly incrementally different ways with some horrendously large budgets, both for money and power,
mm,
and carbon cost consequently. But they're all kind of the same thing.
hmm.
Super advanced, super fantastic, but they're kind of the same thing at the moment. I'm surprised there's just not more diversity, a
Yes.
bit like neurodiversity in a human,
Yeah, yeah.
in
Well, and I guess
these models.
if we do, a strong plateau at some point may lead, which I think we had a previous plateau for neural networks back in the
Hmm.
90s, which has been since. I mean, there was a huge diversity of like SVMs and different approaches, and it seemed like neural networks had fallen away. And then, I mean, it's yeah, we're in a kind of like yeah, I think we may, you're right to point that out, and we may see that diversity in the next round, whatever that is. Ian, it's been absolutely fantastic being able to have this conversation with you. There's so many other things I want to say on the philosophical side, but I know that we're pretty much out of time. I look forward to being in the pub in a
We'll
context
talk
in
about
which
it
we can,
exactly in the pub with Rebel
indeed.
AI, where we talk about the limits of LLMs and navigate those turbulent waters and just try to figure out how the heck we enjoy what we're doing. So yeah, that's why I want to be in the pub with my rebels. So yeah, I'm happy to continue the conversation. Thank you very much, Sam.
No, no, thank you, Ian. And then, so I think you've mentioned, I think through the podcast, the other ways that people can interact with you. You've got the high performance Python book.
Mhm.
There's your newsletter. There's the PyData community. There's the Rebel AI community. Is that, I guess people can get. Is it, have you got an ianozvald.com that people can go
Yeah,
to and
my
like?
blog, ianozsvald.com, is massively out of date now. I haven't touched it in a lot of years. And I've got to put a post up saying I write on LinkedIn some of the time and I write on my newsletter. And otherwise, this is just a bit dead because I'm a dad now.
Yeah,
And yeah, I just haven't got time for the blog. But my email hangs off of that, ian at ianozsvald.com. And I'm always happy to
right.
hear from anyone with interest in this domain. You hear my passion for the bits that I care about. If you care about it too, I'm happy to have a chat. If you're interested in the RKGI challenge in 2025, it's incredibly likely that I'm going to be diving into that one with a goal of competing properly on Kaggle this year round. And I
Awesome.
would love to talk to anyone else who really cares about that and maybe wants to pitch in. If you're coming to PyData London, definitely the conference will be in London in June. 500 plus people. I'll be there. I'm always there. I've been there every year for 11 years now. I'll be running a leadership event, which will be open to anyone at the conference. So it'll be great to meet up. And yeah, otherwise, my newsletter, it's a bit intermittent now, not a number. I'm sure Sam can link it. And then, yeah, happy to hear from you if you've got interest in all these areas. Yeah, I love to natter. Thank you very
Great
much, Sam.
stuff. Thank you, Ian. Been amazing. Well, thanks everyone. This wraps up the pilot episode of Rebel AI. Yeah, all of the things we've mentioned, we'll put them in the show notes. Do reach out. We'd love to chat to you. And maybe one day we'll see you at a PyData or in the Rebel AI
Hmm.
community. Thanks again, Ian. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Sam. Bye bye.